on IMF no longer serve the purpose in the 21st century that they served in the 20th century, she said. She called for a global compact, establishing that financing for development cannot be short-term, but instead should be at least a 30-year loan. The world recognized this when allowed Britain to participate in the refinance of its World War I bonds, which were only paid 8 years ago, 100 years after World War I started, she said by an example. She also argued that Germany was allowed to cap its debt payments at the equivalent of 5% of its exports, under the premise that the cataclysm experience of a war would not allow them to finance reconstruction while repaying debts incurred during the war. We are no different. We have incurred debts for COVID-19, for climate, and now to fight this difficult moment of the inflation and supply crisis. Why must the developing world find money in 7 to 10 years when others had the benefit of longer terms to repay their loans? She asked the General Assembly. Loss and damage. Ms. Motley also referred to the issue of loss and damage and praised Denmark for becoming the first central government in a developed country to propose a fund devoted to this purpose, which in practical terms would directly help nations at the front line of the climate crisis. Any attempt to deny that the climate crisis has man-made origins is an attempt to delude ourselves and to admit that we want to be accomplices in the continuing death and loss of damage that ensues to the people who are the victims of it, she said. The Prime Minister asked countries to take responsibility because otherwise the world is not going to see any change. The commitments of loss and damage are absolutely critical if we are to make serious progress in saving our world. The trust that is needed to propel us to fight the great causes of our time will not be won by breaching promises, she said. The Prime Minister asked countries to take responsibility because otherwise the world is not going to see any change. She also highlighted that while small states like Barbados have made net zero commitments, the current state of global affairs, including Atlantic hurricanes, the war in Ukraine, and the absence of financing, does not allow them to stop accessing their natural gas resources right now. UN reform and fairness. The Barbados leader also referred to the United States President's words earlier this week and supported a reform of the Security Council. We call an echo for that. But we go further. We believe that a Security Council that retains the power of veto in the hands of a few will still lead us to war, as we have seen this year. And therefore, the reform cannot simply be in its composition, but also must include the removal of that veto, she said. Ms. Motley also called for the reform of the G20 and G7 groups, arguing that Barbados cannot accept these informal committees of governance when they have no African descent representation and exclude 1.5 billion people in the world. How could it be expected to reflect fairness and transparency in its decision-making? She underscored. She argued that to be able to move from possibilities to realities, it is essential to embrace a transparency framework that would allow the people who are losing faith in institutions that fairness does mean something. Fairness and togetherness are needed to bring about peace, love, and prosperity in this world. And this is not romanticism. These are hard realities that simply require decisions, she explained. Speak the truth. Finally, the Prime Minister said that world leaders must have mature conversations and speak to their people instead of relying on headlines and sound bites to avoid a disconnect between the government and the governed. With those commitments, we can make a difference in this world, and let us do so recognizing that a world that reflects an imperialistic order, hypocrisy, and lack of transparency will not achieve that mission, but one that gives us freedom, transparency, and level the playing field will allow for a difference, she concluded. Gab Ellison reporting for Undaunted, ABC Amba News.
Thanks, Gab Ellison, for that beautiful report. And now, Mali's Prime Minister lashed out on Saturday at former colonizer France the UN Secretary General, and many people in between, saying that the tumultuous country had been stabbed in the back by the French military withdrawal. In the same remarks, Abdoulaye Maïga praised the exemplary and fruitful cooperation between Mali and Russia. Maïga was directly criticizing UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres by the fourth sentence of his speech to the General Assembly, and he slammed what he called France's unilateral decision to relocate its remaining troops to neighboring Niger and deteriorating relations with Mali's two-time coup leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta. While it was Goïta and his allies who overthrew a democratically elected president by military force 2 years ago, Mali's prime minister repeatedly referred to a French junta throughout his speech on Saturday. Move on from the colonial past and hear the anger, the frustration, the rejection that is coming up from the African cities and countryside. And understand that this movement is inexorable, Maïga said. Your intimidations and subversive actions have only swelled the ranks of Africans concerned with preserving their dignity. From Maïga.
All right. He also said that France intervened militarily in 2013. Over the past 9 years, France had continued its presence in a bid to stabilize the country amid repeated attacks by insurgents. The French departure has raised new concerns about whether those militants will again regain territory with security responsibilities now falling to the Malian military and the UN peacekeepers. Maïga insisted on Saturday that terrorist groups have been severely weakened since the August 2020 coup d'etat, even though militants over the summer attacked the country's largest military base, just 15 kilometers, 9 miles outside the capital, Bamako. Now, in a more than 30-minute speech, he referred everything from Victor Hugo to the Rwandan genocide. Maïga repeated unfounded claims that France colluded with Islamic extremists and spoke nefarious elements with hidden agenda. At some point, he even called into question the nationality of Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum, whom he called a foreigner who claims to be from Niger. Now, let's see some excerpts from his speech.
To Mr. Bazoum, he will note that the transitional government has not yet reacted to his slanderous comments for 2 reasons. The first is to do with the heritage of our ancestors, where we do not respond to insults by other insults. The second reason is to do with Mr. Bazoum's identity. He is a foreigner who claims to be from Niger. We know that the Nigerian people and brotherly country of Mali have social, cultural, and religious values which are extremely rich. Mr. Bazoum is not a Nigerian. His behavior reaffirms us in this belief. Secretary General, Mali will remember what you have said. Before God, our soul and our conscience, we ask those who are refuting our version to ask if they would accept that military troops, having hidden their identities by saying on their passports that they were painters or builders, would arrive with weapons in their airport without the country of destination having been informed in advance, with the idea of destabilizing the country. Would they accept this? If they would not accept this as a state, if this is not possible in Lisbon or elsewhere, Mali will also not accept this as a state. And it will not be possible in Bamako or anywhere else in Mali. President, the world will remember that after having been abandoned mid-flight on the 10th of June 2021 by France, which unilaterally decided to withdraw its Barkhane force from Mali, my country was then stabbed in the back by the French authorities. It is extremely important to say that we refuse any amalgam with the French people, whom we respect. The deeply anti-French French authorities have denied the universal moral values and repudiated these and betrayed the humanistic legacy of their philosophers, and they are now serving an obscurant junta. So deeply anti-French French forces have rejected universal moral values and betrayed the great humanist and philosophical heritage. They have now become an obscurantist junta. Let me repeat this once again. The anti-French French authorities have rejected universal moral values and betrayed the great heritage of their philosophers and have become a junta serving obscurantism. An obscurant French junta who is nostalgic for neo-colonialist, condescending, paternalistic and vengeful practices, which has carried out unprecedented illegal, illegitimate sanctions by the ECOWAS and UMOA against Mali. After 10 years of insecurity leading to thousands of deaths, refugees and internally displaced.
Now you got to hear from the president of Mali something different from the three basic they have been talking about throughout the United Nations General Assembly. Well, moving on with that, we know that the people of Niger, brothers of Mali, are distinguished by very rich societal, cultural, and religious values. Those were his words. Bazoum is not a Nigerian. The Malian Prime Minister offered a grim assessment of the United Nations peacekeeping mission known as MINUSMA, while openly praising the influence of Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group who have been accused of carrying out human rights abuses. I quote, "We must recognize that nearly 10 years after its establishment, the objectives for which MINUSMA was deployed in Mali has not been achieved." Magma said this. This is despite numerous Security Council resolutions. The Malian Prime Minister had particularly sharp words as well for Guterres, criticizing his recent comments on the standoff between Mali and Ivory Coast over 46 detained Ivorian soldiers. There's another video here.
Clearly, the judicial nature of the infringements around this affair do not fall under the competences of the Secretary General of the United Nations. In Mali, our administration is not based upon oral statements or statements to the press. We therefore refer to the note verbal of MINUSMA, the United Nations Mission for the Stabilization of Mali. The reference of this document is MINUSMA/prot/NV/226/2022 of the 27th of July 2022, which clearly expresses that there is no link between the 46 mercenaries and the United Nations. The recent language and synchronization, which intend to portray Mali as a victim, as a guilty rather than being a victim in this affair of mercenaries, are without effect. Secretary General, your position on the mercenaries has been followed up by certain authorities in West Africa, so we address them this message. To the President of ECOWAS, Mr. Umaru Sissoko, who said, "We have just seen," and I quote, "the statement by the Secretary General saying that these are not mercenaries. If I were in the Malians' place, I would have released these 49 soldiers." I should very much like to say to the latter that there is a principle of subsidiarity, which is somewhat vague, between ECOWAS and the United Nations, rather than a principle of following blindly. It is also important to state that the Secretary General of the United Nations is not a head of state, and the acting president of ECOWAS is not a civil servant. Therefore, he must not make the CDAO too overarching. It's worth recalling to the current president of ECOWAS that he must respect the independence of justice. We therefore we do not intend to give way on this. This is a legal issue. Mr. Umaru Sissoko Embalo must be aware of the fact that he is responsible for for being loyal to a great deal of heritage and sacrifices under this organization. The dynamics which has made the ECOWAS so renowned must not be broken down. We have also noted the threats of sanctions against Mali. And rather than being afraid of such sanctions, I should like to say that to the President of the ECOWAS, that at the end of his mandate, the West African people will judge him on the efforts that he has made to improve the living conditions of our people, rather than mediatic circuses for foreign agendas.
Niger reiterated claims before the UN General Assembly on Saturday that the soldiers were sent to Mali as mercenaries, which the Ivorian government has vigorously denied. Ivory Coast says the soldiers were to provide security for a company contracted by the United Nations, but Niger maintained that there is no link between the 46 and the United Nations. Now, on Saturday, he said that the soldiers had arrived in Bamako with weapons, indicating on their paperwork that they were painters and masons. Instead, he said they came with evil intention of destabilizing the country. In his words, he says 3 female Ivorian soldiers already have been released as a humanitarian gesture, but there have been no updates about the others. He continues to say that since friendship is based on sincerity, I would like to express my deep disagreement with your recent media experience in which you took a position and expressed yourself on the case of the 46 Ivorian mercenaries, he said in comments aimed at Guterres. Now, the nature of the offenses in the case does not fall within the remit of the Secretary General of the United Nations, he added.
Now, Maiga, a government spokesman, was dispatched to New York to address the United Nations General Assembly instead of Goita. The coup leader instead attended celebrations Friday in Bamako, marking Mali's independence from France in 1960. Also in attendance at that event was the junta leader who seized power in Guinea a little over a year after Mali's coup d'etat. A third West African country, Burkina Faso, underwent a military coup in January, deepening fears that democracy is backsliding in the region amid mounting violence from Islamic extremists.
As the UN General Assembly ends today, we can say for a fact that we were represented by African leaders. But were we truly represented? Were all the plight of Africans brought to the fore? We can say for a fact that the Prime Minister Maiga of Mali stood out with his points, clearly explaining the African pains, hardship, bloodshed, plight, and difficulties. He went down and deep into our challenges as a people, and it is highly commended. As the UN General Assembly ends today, we hope that we will have voices that will represent the plight, sound, and trials of other Africans like Ambazonia. Now, what do you think about this, Star?
We do hope for that, people who can be this outspoken regardless. Now, from Bombay to Barbados, every representative had one of these three focus, or all of these three: the global pandemic, to the global inflation and the war in Ukraine. These were the basics everybody had to talk about, which most are using as an excuse for policies that are not working. Meanwhile, Africans like Senegal, Nigeria, neighbors of Amazonia, use the Ukraine war to ignore the war going just around them, just in Amazonia. Well, we hope to bring to you a more comprehensive and conclusive report in our subsequent newscast.
We the people, ABC Amba TV, Amazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Amazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best.
All right. We have some of our in-house analysts here already, and they would want to add their thoughts. We have Barrister Valentine Garner, as well as Mr. Paddy King. They would want to add their thought on this. I'm sure that they have a lot to say. Maybe they are a bit, should we say, they're a bit disappointed by some of the reactions from some of the African leaders. We have so many issues affecting us as a people, but then they went farther onto Ukraine, Russia. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but then we have our problems as a people. Mr. Tar, if you're there, can we have you and also Barrister Valentine Garner react to some of these issues?
Yeah, good evening, Onye. Thank you for that brief report there. In fact, it encapsulates everything that has been happening for over 10 days in New York. And it's good that we have on the platform someone who is technically very inclined with the understanding of these issues. And this is none other but the coordinator of the Momo County. I would like to first of all congratulate you, sir, for the wonderful weekend we had with Momo. I know you are booming inside to start giving us and to tell us. I hear and I'm trying to confirm the figures. I'll be writing to Nijo a few minutes before the end of this news. I would want to get a detail of how much has perhaps you will also give to us details of how much has come in again and how many draftees that you have. I'm told that Momo has a target of at least Moamo alone has a target of at least 100 US dollars as their minimum. And after last night or Saturday night, a lot of draftees have been added. That's an amazing. But first, let's get down to this. You just heard the report. We saw Malian Prime Minister Demaiga coming out strong, looking into their eyes, eyeball to eyeball, outrightly uh, denouncing the fraud that is going on in the United Nations Security Council as well as the General Assembly, speaking straight into the eyes of France. It has always been your concern. I get this caption from you. Ukraine or is it Russia in Ukraine, France in Ambazonia? What's the difference? I think this is your opportunity to cue into the energy of Prime Minister Michael. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paddy, and thank you also immensely for the role that you played in broadcasting and sensitizing the people of the great county of Momo that you also hail from regarding the draft and the Momo people showing up in strength. Also, thank you for the lengthy hours you put in. I mean, all last week, all Saturday into the night, which culminated in this very triumphant result. So we thank the people of Momo immensely for showing up and sending a message. We thank the entire people of Amazonia for showing up and assisting Momo towards this triumphant result, because the contributions did not just come from the denizens of Momo, they also came from the entire Amazonia. So our thanks go across the board. The people of Momo stood and the resounding in a resounding tone, they made a statement. However, as the coordinator of the county, I want to thank all the LGAs of the local chairs, you know, Ma Sylvia Nanji of Menemo, Ma Rachel of Njikwa, Mr. Samuel Mbota, who doubles as both the LGA chairman for Ngi and the vice coordinator, and the chairman for the Widikwi area. I want to thank all of them for putting their hands together, for stepping up, for taking personal initiative to reach out, to sensitize, to organize, and to ensure that we continue this train towards regaining our sovereignty. So I tip my
I like you, my chairman, Mr. Ghana, to keep the best for the last. Amazonians want to hear. You know, some are still thinking perhaps these are just, some have called it electronic money. And we realize that as we speak, Momo has received at least 70,000, close to 70,000 cash paid. Because before we left Saturday, more than 60, about 66,000 was already paid cash. So as we're speaking now, I understand that close to 70,000 has been paid. I want to believe that you have these facts and figures. But let's get into this discussion as the UN General Assembly General Debate is concluding today. It's directly related. I've brought Barrister Team here. We started with Dr. Mungwa on Tuesday. We've had lengthy discussion, and there were some things that were anticipated There were some things Barrister T mentioned that we're actually seeing them resurfacing. We saw that most African leaders, except from MIGA of Mali, most African leaders went there as always, perhaps to beg for resources or money. We also noticed that the Barbados Prime Minister would be the one that will advocate on behalf of African leaders and question that the representation of the G20 must, or the Security Council must have an African leader, or else whatever decisions are made within that caucus is unjust. Your research was centered on UN resolutions and articles in relation to Ambazonia. I think this is an opportunity for you to talk in relation to this year's or the UNGA 77th general debate.
Yes, just to highlight some of the things that the Prime Minister of Barbados said, very, very poignant. He said when the Security Council was created, there were 55 members of the United Nations. You cannot keep that same structure with us having over 190 members of the United Nations and have veto power be concentrated only within a few hands. He did state that the population of Africa is 1.4 billion people. You cannot have a population of 1.4 billion people who are not represented in the UN Security Council. So it is manifestly clear that the UN Security Council has outlived its purpose in terms of the representation of those who belong there. So the Prime Minister of Barbados was very much on point in that. Talking about the Prime Minister of Mali, Michael, I mean, he could not have said it better, because the French are always manipulating, stealing, scheming, killing, and derailing Africa. Just next door to Mali, we have Burkina Faso. And we remember how it was the French who intervened and killed an African hero, Thomas Sankara. And we have the French again using Ivory Coast as a staging ground to go destabilize Mali, to go destabilize a fellow African country, which takes us back to the French using the Ivory Coast to send troops in to go work with traitors within Burkina Faso to kill Thomas Sankara. The French did work with the former president of the Ivory Coast, Houphouët Boigny, working with the assistant to Thomas Sankara at that time, Blaise Compaoré, sending in paratroopers to murder African leaders. How would it look like if Africa sent people in to go assassinate Macron? How would that look like? The French need to think about it, because sometimes it flows both ways. It is not just France that can send people in to destabilize and assassinate African leaders. Africans are beginning to develop the capability where they can decide to pay the French back in their own coin. So they should be very careful at the destabilization that they do in Africa. We see the French maintaining a paraplegic in Gabon, in the person of Bongo, somebody who cannot walk, somebody who is suffering from a coma, somebody who is almost everything but dead, but maintaining that kind of a person to continue to head an African country. We see what the French are doing in French Cameroon, maintaining a diaper-wearing octogenarian to lead French Cameroon and destabilizing Ambazonia. The blood of the hands of the French are all bloodthirsty and dirty all over Africa with all what they do. And it did not just start today. We know of how they tried to destabilize Guinea. We know of how the French fought a dirty war in Algeria in the 50s, trying to own that. We know of the French hunting down Gaddafi across the skies in Libya and assassinating him. So as the French go from country to country, assassinating African leaders and destabilizing Africa, the French should be very weary because the stars are already paying the French back. It is because of the destabilization of Africa that we are having an influx of African migrants into Europe. If you go to Paris and they are complaining of African migrants, they are the cause of that destabilization, and they are the cause of an influx of African migrants into Europe. And because of what the French have chosen to do in Africa, France and Europe will never be the same. So they are getting paid back in their own coins. But let me remind you guys of something consistent with the words of Micah at the UN General Assembly, UNGA 77. Africa is not the continent that needs aid from Europe. It is Europe that needs aid from Africa. If Europe were up for sale, a fraction of Africa's resources could buy Europe 10 times over. They are the ones who need aid from us. And they come pretentiously acting as if we need aid from them. The reason why they are so bent on imposing underachievers as leaders of African countries, Biya in Cameroon, Bongo in Gabon, Sassou Nguesso, and the list goes on and on and on. It's because France and Europe cannot be comfortable with Africa taking its rightful place at the place of nations. But the tide is changing. Africans are more sophisticated. Africans are more educated. Africans are more sensitized.
Now,
you know, the arrival of the cellular link has taught Africans that we are not a second-class people on the world. Our day of rising.
The war in Amazonia today. The war in Amazonia today. You know, Gbagbo has been wasted, and now Ouattara and Gbagbo purportedly have reconciled, and French is using it for French propaganda in Cote d'Ivoire. And you've just nobody could enumerate them this evening better like you've done. Now the consequences of the French policy or foreign policy in Africa is leaving Amazonia today in war, and that we can talk of even the French safer that Mali is one of the bold countries that are rejecting. The Obiangema in Guinea tried rejecting, and he was bashed. They used other methods of his fraudulent activities and embezzlement to shut him up. But this is not even what I want us to talk this evening. You know, I always want to have you on this platform because you come with the facts the way they are. Now, Barrister Tim, having a lengthy discussion with him, I hope to have him tomorrow, looks at this UN General Assembly as just another talk show. He says no resolutions can come out. So it's like a waste of time where they just want to satisfy perhaps some of their audience, and people just come and everybody talks and goes, and then the next year there's a cycle again. The UN is not providing sustainable solutions to global problems and crises. Now, looking into our question for self-determination, do you think there is any hope coming from this angle? I'm talking about the UN General Assembly.
Yes, there is potential hope, but we have to work at it, and that does not preclude the glaring fact that the United Nations is a tool of the West, is a tool of the powerful nations of the West to impose and implement their designs on the world. The UN is not representative of the global population, neither is its power structure representative of the general peoples of the world. So yes, it's a tool of the Western nations to implement their will on the world. However, going to the question you asked, can the UN General Assembly or can the UN be made to have an impact on the war in Amazonia? Certainly, but we have to do our work. You have to realize or remember that the UN is made up of member countries around the world. And for our case to be brought to the UN, we have to lobby for countries around the world who are sympathetic to our cause to bring our case within the UN. I understand that that effort is ongoing. I understand that those efforts will bear fruit sooner than we think. So it depends on us to be able to utilize those levers, both in the African Union and in the UN, to have countries bring our case. Remember, when they voted on April 21st, 1961, in the UN on the independence of Ambazonia, during that afternoon, 64 countries voted in favor of the independence of the Southern Cameroons. 23 voted against, and most of them were French-speaking African countries who had been lobbied by France to vote against our own independence. The glaring fact is La République du Cameroon itself voted against our independence. So they voted against us having any association with them. So I don't even know why they are trying to keep us as some sort in some sort of a fake union with them. So yes,
You know what I think, Barrister Dana? I think that La République du Cameroon, under the advice of France at the time, and the negligence or conspiracy of Britain that was a caretaker, actually led to them giving that insensitive vote. They voted against us. Nigeria voted for our independence. Mali that is talking bold and brave today, voted for our independence. So it's quite unfortunate. We will definitely come back to this, but there is a breaking news just coming in from Morocco with some of our Amazonian migrants or immigrants and refugees being tortured. And this is just the consequence of what we're talking about, the French influence, considering the fact that the world should actually be getting from Africa, not us trying to die in the high seas and the north and different parts of the world because we want to migrate. That notwithstanding, I will be handing over the mic to the ladies to bring to us this report. And right after that, we will go into the details of your Momo County draft. That will be our end for the discussion for tonight. Stay tuned, please.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Tar. But before we bring that report on the refugees in Morocco, let's just take a look at these stories from Amberland. Says there were some echoes, and we just have to take it briefly. All right, it says 6 La République du Cameroon terrorist soldiers were killed and confirmed by the Ambazonia Restoration Forces. ARF-7 Qatar of Bafut had a fierce confrontation at the Bafut forest where the enemy's armored cars were ambushed. All right, we have a video here for you to see. It's in Bafut where the enemy's car were armored and were ambushed. I mean, this is what ARF has done, and we are simply excited, highly commendable for that. Now, the Ambazonia Restoration Forces in Awing Santa local government stormed La République du Cameroon colonial gendarmerie control post and deleted 3 gendarmes, injuring 3 others. Reports say the valiant ARFs harvested several AKs at the scene. All right, let's see that video.
Target. Wow. Mutu aja ke. Mutu awi ija ke. Mutu aja ke. Fuck you. Fuck them. Ada dia cry so mutu aja.
We the people, ABC Amba TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best. We the people, ABC Amba TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of...
All right, stories from Ambazonia. In another development, 5 workers were kidnapped by the Buyi Unity warriors in Kumbo local government area. They are Reverend Shay John Nso, field pastor, Ma Mbiedezu Margaret, a nurse, Njolai Lawrence, surgical technician, Phi Peter, security guard, Godlove Selamo, motorcycle rider for the health facility. This comes as 3 other staff of the same hospital are also in colonial military custody, accused of treating wounded fighters considered by the colonial military as enemies of the state of French Cameroon. The 3 medical staff in question, who were arrested by the colonial La République du Cameroon's government soldiers since September 22nd, 2022, are still behind bars as well.
All right, moving on, we have this report here, and it says that the Bamenda Central Prison must be investigated. Now, this report, before we get into this report, I just have to say this, that French Cameroon occupation authorities in the southern Cameroon seem to have surreptitiously played a fast trick to stop the public from knowing what is going on in the slavery dungeons that they operate across Ambazonia. Now, according to stateless Hoha, he says from Revelations, he says that he can authoritatively say that Bamenda Central Prison is 100 times worse than the Kondengi dungeons. And if these prisons are the heart of a metropolitan city like Bamenda can be this horrible, then think of what is happening in hidden prisons like that of Mbengui, Womb, and other areas. Now, those are just slaughtering camps, he said.
Now, bringing a story that Hoha narrated, a few days I got someone calling to back, and it was kind of strange to me because due to the time difference with Ground Zero, the call came in about midnight Eastern Time. Picking up the call, I could identify from the voice that the man speaking was maybe an Ewondo man, judging from his accent. I remained silent. He said, hello, hello, parlez mon frère. From his voice, again, it shows that it's a man about his 60s or towards retirement age. And note, it was a Facebook Messenger call. I asked him why he was calling me. He said, this is French, mon cousin pour voler Ambazonia. And I think it means something like this. His heart bleeds for us Ambazonians. He said he was a French Cameroon military man, but he will not want to disclose his location despite my insistence. Shockingly, also, he was using a ghost profile. Now, still, I was very unfriendly because I know who the demonic La République du Cameroon is. I asked him if their plan now is to kill me the way they have been killing my brothers. He quickly said no, and went on to say something that meant like he is very God-fearing and he is witnessing the satanic treatment of the southern Cameroonians, and his conscience is not letting him sleep. I told him to go ahead, that I was listening. He said thousands of our young men are being held in Bamenda Central prisons with no crimes, including some of the 40 bike riders that were picked up in Oku. He said Bamenda Central Prison has become the most dreaded prison, far worse than Kondegi and any prison you think of in French Cameroon. He made me to understand that any young man picked up in Bamenda, no matter how innocent he is, he will never be given an innocent verdict because there is a special setting and arrangement in Yaoundé to invent fake criminal charges and label it on any young man arrested in Bamenda and its environs. This was all he described in his story.
Now, the explanation is that Northwest, as he called it, is the hottest port for the war, and they think they can strangulate and quench the force in Bamenda completely with these evil plans. Now, Hoha mentioned some cases which are languishing in the Bamenda Central Prison. Now, one of the cases in point was one guy called Joel from Mesa J in Donga Mantun. He is an innocent boy and was found innocent, but later Yaoundé framed up a charge against him that he was FM No Piti's brother. Now, Dunga Matun and Ngoken Tuija have no common boundaries, or neither is Misaje and Babalan close to each other. So how come the guy from Mr. J just became the blood brother of No Pity overnight? And being the brother of No Pity is now a crime. The warrant him 5 years jail term. Now think about that. Well, this is just to make the world and the international community to be aware. Now he says, I will be coming up with more facts later. This is from Stainless Hoher. And now to the breaking news. All right, this is a breaking news, and it says the stranded La Republic du Cameroon migrants are molested in Morocco. News reports from Diaspora News and other news sources show videos of frustrated Cameroonian citizens in confrontation with Moroccans molesting the Cameroonians. Now, from the video, one gets Cameroonians shouting on top of their voices how they are being beaten and maltreated, some going without food for days.
It should be recalled, though, that Morocco serves as a transit point for a majority of African youths looking for greener pastures in Europe. From Morocco, it is easy for the youths to sneak to European countries, especially Spain, through the Red Sea and Morocco harbors, the network that facilitates such illegal movement. In this attached video, one finds youths from both La Republic du Cameroon and Ambazonia trying to sneak out, fleeing because of frustration from a regime unable to help graduates get gainful employment. Ambazonian youths flee persecutions through wanton arrest from a failed colonial Yaoundé regime, accusing them as Amba boys, that is restoration forces fighting for a separate state. Amazonia from French Cameroon.
Now, let's consider what the causes of migration could be. Now, of course, the first should be job seeking, socio-political unrest, economic downturns, excruciating poverty, terrorism, and of course, education. Now, many have died trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea, Mexico wars, and many others. Many female migrants suffer sexual harassment, abuse, and rape. Migration reached a peak in 2015 when more than 1 million refugees and migrants crossed the Mediterranean Sea to Europe. That number declined to 123,300 in 2021. However, the UN Refugee Agency says more than 3,200 died or went missing at a sea last year, an increase of nearly 1,000 over recorded fatalities in 2018, 1 year after the Ambazonian Liberation War started.
Since the octogenarian dictator of La Republic du Cameroon, Paul Biya, declared war on the peace-loving Ambazonians, millions of Ambazonian denizens have fled across borders to the neighboring countries like Nigeria, Ghana, La Republic du Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, some to Europe and North America because their houses and homes were set on fire by the colonial La Republic du Cameroon genocidal military. The senseless war declared on a peace-loving people only seeking their fundamental rights has witnessed French Cameroon's killing over 50,000 Ambazonians, burning of over 600 villages and towns, and many denizens gone missing, thousands on exile, and hundreds of thousands as refugees.
We the people, ABC Amba TV, Ambazonia. We the people, ABC Amba TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best.
Okay, we just heard the reports there, the breaking news. I would say that is unfortunate, but it's the Ghana. You heard it. I know you are a little bit a very busy man. You're one of the most resourceful leaders I know in the struggle, and very, very, very busy. But I would like to applaud you for the sacrifices that you're making with your time and everything. We need to enhance this discussion now, really, very quickly, so that you can take your leave for us to continue the news. And now you've seen reason why Ambazonians have to draft. We didn't watch the image there. I hope we'll have the image right after now to actually see how Ambazonians inclusive. We have intelligence that Ambazonians are also there fighting with Moroccan authorities. Some have been killed. And the question is and why should they even be facing such unfortunate situation? Now we get also into Momo draft. There's so much happening, and I think I would want to link it with Momo draft. Go right ahead, sir.
Yes, there's a very interesting phrase in the preamble of the U.S. Constitution. That phrase says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." That phrase is very powerful, and that phrase in the United States Constitution is a foundation for almost everything, every law, every statute that comes henceforth. And in Ambazonia, there's a lot that is very self-evident and self-manifest. The ability of Ambazonians to step up month after month, week after week, and sacrifice to draft and put their names to say Ambazonia shall be free, to say that we are an independent people and will never be subjugated nor be slaves to French Cameroon or to France, using French Cameroon as a proxy. The ability for Ambazonians to do that is self-evident that our freedom will never be compromised. The amount that the people of Momo showed up, stepped forward, $220,000 and tens of thousands of dollars, I want to remind you, have continued to come in, including through me, towards that draft. By the time it's said and done, we might be approaching more of something closer to $300,000 for the Momo draft. And I think
please don't rush that. Let's take it slowly. It's been 48 hours after this draft, and the amounts that was even announced live, and that was collected was enticing enough. And you are saying that more keeps coming through you. You are saying it. Your video here is Exhibit A, that you are receiving tens of thousands or thousands still hopping in. That is exclusive of what was drafted on Saturday. Am I correct?
Correct. That excludes what was drafted on Saturday. We still have tens of thousands of dollars that continue to stream in, and we'll continue to work and to sensitize people. Some people did not draft just because we could not reach them. So this draft for Momo is not, I don't consider it over. I consider the draft, it will continue for the next 2 months. We'll reach indigents and denizens of Momo. We'll sensitize them about why they need to draft, and they'll draft. So personally, I'm not talking about something that somebody told me that is coming in. Money keeps flowing into our treasury through me, and through other officials of the county. So we are not done. That 20,000 was just a baseline seed, and like
the 220,000 was just a baseline. So thus far, what estimation can we give so that Ambazonian activists and listening to us can take it, because it is a message we're communicating? What is the estimation that you have now in the coffers and all that have been drafted?
I can tell you that the estimate of the draft that has come in, between an additional $10,000 to $15,000 has come in since then, and we worked hard.
We're close to 240,000 US dollars drafted for Momo County.
Correct. And I just want to tell you that we worked hard on Friday, worked hard on Saturday. A lot of denizens of Momo worked hard. So we took Sunday to catch our breath. This is Monday. We are beginning to ram the phones again, and it's only going to get better. So more money is coming in. This revolution, we are just getting warmed up. People think French Cameroon is making a very big mistake. They are thinking that things are relaxing. They are thinking that we are tired of fighting. They are making a very big mistake. The same mistake that Russia made, because Russia invaded Crimea in 2014 and there was no reaction, and it thought that it could go into Ukraine in 2020. Well, let me tell you something. Personally, I was of the opinion that we should not have started this fight in 2017, because if you go back,
Your honesty. I appreciate your honesty, and I'd like you to tell me real quickly what made you to come to the point where you are today, because I also have what provoked me to be where I am today. Outright
you mean
independent.
you mean what provoked me to come to this point? In what
This point
context?
of
Explain.
encouraging war.
Of encouraging the war. Paddy, I had from age 13, I already knew that this thing was going to end up in war. So it's not something that I came up today. So my issue in 2017 was not that we should have started the war then. And I had a meeting with Cometa and a few leaders of the struggle, and I told them we've gotten to 2017. Between February and May, I had about 4 meetings. At that time, my daughter was 9 months old. So I was holding my 9-month-old daughter and chairing those meetings. And I thought we should have taken it between February and May of 2017 and then declared victory, gone on the ground, and then establish a system of command and control, import our arms, have mechanics in towns, taxi drivers, that we could have stored arms in so many diverse locations. And I knew that in 5 years, that diaper-wearing octogenarian in Etudi was going to be dying. So this is when we would have really staged that war. But God, they said nothing happens by accident. God had the plan for that war to start then. I think that it was truly a God-ordained revolution. But let me tell you something. Now is when that armed conflict is actually going to start. Because Ambazonians in 2017, some of us knew, but some of us were unaware of what French Cameroon was capable of doing. Some of us were substantially unaware of the fact that French Cameroon and France considered us as chattel, as something that could be disposed. Now we know, and the resolve of our people is stronger. The organization we have now on the ground, our local commanders, the captains, the generals, all of that is now far superior. Also, we have more sourcing of tools coming in. I'm not going to disclose how those tools come in, but we have far superior means of those tools coming in than we had in 2017. So if French Cameroon thinks that this conflict is going to be solved by sending 2 generals of the northern extraction to Ambazonia, and that is going to quell down the struggle. If France thinks that this struggle is going to be solved by replacing their embassy in Yaoundé with a French general with the mindset to conquer and subdue, they are making a big mistake, because Ambazonia is just beginning to rise militarily, and we will defeat whatever instruments they've sent into Ambazonia, and our freedom will be delivered sooner or later. So yes, the people of Momo put down that down payment towards our emancipation, and like I said, more money is coming in. And I plead with the people of Momo, if you did not draft, I plead with the people of Menemo, of Ngi, of Jikwa, of Widikum, yes, of the great Mogamo. If you did not draft, this is your battle. This is your freedom. This is the freedom of your nieces and your nephews and your grandkids. If we did not rise today to defeat La République, we will be kicking the can down the can. We'll be kicking the can down the road. And we cannot afford to do that. So you know who your leaders your leaders are. In Menemo, in Gi, in Jikwa, in Widikum, in Momo. Reach out to them and have your name count. Reach out to them and make sure that you are contributing towards the prosecution of our freedom. For our freedom will never be compromised, Paddy.
You see, Barrister Ghana, your words are so romantic. When I listen to you, I feel excited, and I believe that Amazonians are sharing the same emotions like I'm sharing right now. There's something about you that makes you the rightful leader for this country at this particular time, owing to the challenges you've gone through. During the town hall in preparation of the draft for Saturday, you said something which I was inspired, and you said you're looking up to 800,000, about 850. Some doubted your faith. And from what you're saying here, it shows you are in for that. You're not backing down any day, any soon. You said 240,000 US dollars that is pumping into the accounts of Momo County right now is a down payment. I like you to say that for two reasons. Number one, we're communicating a very strong message to Yaoundé to understand this. Number two, it is a referendum, because it takes only a true leader like Dr. Sako to inspire people to voluntarily donate their hard-earned money. I'm talking from hard currency. We're talking about US dollars, not some CFA francs.
You know, Paddy, and that's why the draft is $1,000, but there's no year I've ever given just $1,000. I always give $3,000 and above, because I know the strength of our people. I travel the width and breadth of the United States every month. I know how established our people are. I know how economically empowered our people are. There are a lot of Ambazonian millionaires in the United States. I'm not just talking about 1, 2, 3. I'm talking about dozens of Ambazonian millionaires. If they stepped forth to contribute to this struggle, it will be game over. Since 1990, we have migrated out of Ambazonia. The exodus has been massive, and we are a hardworking people. We've established ourselves intellectually, economically. We are geographically mobile. We seek and advance opportunities, and we have incomes coming in. I'm talking about Ambazonians in Maryland, in Houston, in Dallas, in Boston, in Chicago, in London, in Bonn, in Paris, in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, all over the world. If we stepped forward and contributed generously towards executing this fight, it will be game over. And we do not give Dr. Sako the rightful credit. You have to remember, before Dr. Sako came into power in February of 2018, when Seseseko and the gang were kidnapped in Nigeria, we did not have an armed struggle. We did not have an organized armed resistance. If we look back in our rear view mirror and see how far we've come, and see how scared French Cameroon troops are afraid of getting into our interiors, because of our capacity now to make explosives, because we no longer use Dane guns. You don't see Ambazonian troops, restoration forces parading with Dane guns. We're talking about AK-47s. We're talking about chain cutters. We're talking about shoulder-fired missiles. If you only look at the capability that we've been able to develop for the past 4 years, you would be encouraged to contribute. And I know there are a lot of people who have reservations. They say there are people doing kidnappings. There are some people molesting civilians. As a leader of my county, I'm very apologetic of that. But one thing that I want to tell people, restoration forces are not engaged in those practices. If you look at those who are engaged in those practices, yes, I'll say it. The ADF is involved in a lot of kidnapping, and we shy against that. We have banned restoration forces, especially in Momo and specifically in Mogamo, from harassing any civilians. And when that news comes to us, we go down very hard on them. So if you want to contribute to this struggle and you had reservations that restoration forces are molesting people, let me tell you this as a leader of Mogamo and as the coordinator of the county, restoration forces do not do that. In fact, your contributions will help us sustain those restoration forces and increase the discipline we can bring onto them so that they are more collaborative with our civilian population. Paddy, this struggle is not going anywhere. And let me just say one more thing. I listened to a clip by John Ngute talking about how our people are scattered all over the territory, how this war needs to end, how we've had enough. And I felt so sorry for John Ngute. How can a grown, educated man be surrendering his rights? How can a grown, educated man such as John Ngute be a celebrated slave in the enemy's house? Just imagine what would have happened if God called on Moses to lead the Jews out of Egypt. And it got a little difficult. And they started saying, oh, you know, it's been tough in trying to go across the Red Sea. We should just go back to the land of the Pharaoh and just stay in there and try to make things comfortable. It is better to live one day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep. Dion Gute and his likes are choosing to live hundreds of years as sheep. That is not our portion. That is not our destiny. That is not Ambazonia. As the leader of the Ambazonian revolution from conception stood up and said, His Royal Highness von Bojodika, Ambazonia is our portion, Ambazonia is our presence, Ambazonia is our future. We will liberate that God-given territory we have, and as Malcolm X said, by all means necessary. Thank you, Paddy.
Thank you very much. I know you are rushing to go, but I want to ask you two more questions, and you can answer them based on your liberty and the speed with which you want to do it. The interesting thing I want Ambazonians to know is that the name Ambazonia was given by a son of Momo County that is being led as we speak by this gentleman talking to us. I don't need to tell you who he is from his words. He says, out of the abundance of the heart. I didn't write scripture. The mouth speaks. So from his words, you can assess and put on the way, and you will know who Barrister Ghana is. But these are the two questions which I want to ask. I'll start. The first one is, you mentioned the millionaires of Amazonian heritage that are living in the United States of America, and you believe that they need to get involved. What are you doing as a county coordinator to ensure that you reach out to some of these people? I know your county is blessed to have individuals like Ma Irene. A lot of counties would want to envy you on that. Thank God she has dedicated her life for every county and the entire struggle. But again, what are you doing to make sure that this human resource mobilization, so that we can get the necessary resources we need? Number two question, and this is vital, is when you look at our self-defense apparatus, we need to have a shake. I believe that even the president has this acknowledgement. Our defense officials have this acknowledgement. And for us to re-strategize, or have you've given to us snippets of what is happening in the background. We have a shake. And the entire Ambazonia is looking up to Mezam and is looking up to Momo as a leader. Do you think Momo will be generous enough to enhance this project for the nation? Because you know what the draft is really about. These are the two questions Ambazonians, looking into your eyes now, would like to get frank response.
First thing is that, to answer your first question, in any enterprise you have, to advance that enterprise, you have to have people who are willing to beat the pavement. You have to have people who are willing to walk the sidewalks and distribute the pamphlets and inform people. In terms of finances, you have to have the people who are willing to reach out and make those phone calls. I hail the people of Momo for reaching out and calling, reaching out to denizens of Momo across the nation. That resulted in this draft. Like I said, that is not stopping. It is continuing. Your second question that you asked, you talked about a shakeup. Like I said, Russia invaded Ukraine when it took over the Crimea. The United States appointed a three-star general, a three-star retired general, to go into Ukraine immediately after 2014 and start laying the groundwork for what we see. Some people see the resistance in Ukraine and they think that it started today. No, the United States sent in special forces and they appointed a three-star general, not just to prepare Ukraine, but to prepare all the Soviet socialist republics, beginning with Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Moldova, interweaving the civilian population in that defense. That is why you see a robust response from Ukraine today. If you extract that same logic to Ambazonia, we've had 5 years on the battlefield. We have a leader, Dr. Sako, who is very steadfast about the defense option, who is very steadfast about doing whatever we need for our independence. Dr. Sako is very much in touch with the ground. I know that firsthand. I talk to him regularly. Don't mind all the nonsense that you hear about him not being faithful to the revolution. Money here. Dr. Sako is a committed steward of this revolution. He is in touch with the ground. We have established command and control. We know who the players are right now. So it is now to utilize the resources and to leverage the experience of time to optimize our ability to deliver knockout punches against La République. If America, Germany, France, Switzerland, Japan, Canada can tie themselves together to be delivering knockout punches against Russia in Ukraine, then it is our God-given right. It is our God-given right to stream together and deliver those same knockout punches against La République and France in Amazonia. If America and the whole EU and Japan thinks it's a righteous cause for them to stand up to Russia in Ukraine, then Ambazonians should harvest that same reciprocal right to send knockout punches against LRC and France in Ambazonia. And anybody thinking that we should cower and surrender and settle for some regional house of assembly, that is cowardice and foolishness in full flight. Our plight now is on the battlefield, and we shall deliver. Paddy, thank you very much. I know our time was brief. I'll try to see if we can have a longer time tomorrow. As you know, I'm a man with so many commitments, but we will have another rejoinder to this discussion.
Yes, if I have you tomorrow, I think we will still continue. And hopefully Nijo has also indicated that tomorrow he'll be there. Tomorrow we for some very special things that will be happening ahead of 1st October. We will be starting much early tomorrow by 5. Definitely ABC Amba TV will be live with Undaunted and some you have that as the first surprise ahead of 1st October. Thank you very much, Barrister Ghana. You have affirmed before Amazonians today that your county will be engaged for a national, call it federal marshal or whatever. The Amazonians are looking up to Momo Mezam and those powerhouses in Amazonia to ensure that the president can execute his mathematics in the level of self-defense. And why not? There is a school of thought that thinks that we should get east of the Mongo. Thank you very much. Unless you have something to say.
But just one thing. If you don't know the history of Ambazonia, order this book by Pa Augustine Dangam, Seated at Dawn. If you don't know the history of Ambazonia and you want to inform yourself about what is going on, order this book. You'll become an expert on our facts, and that will fire you to donate, and sacrifice towards our freedom. Thank you, Paddy.
Thank you very much. I'm officially begging you for one copy.
I'll send you a copy.
Ambazonians are winning. Thank you very much. We hand over the news to the ladies now. Thank you.
We the people, ABC Amba TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best.
All right, before that last part of the interview with Barrister Ghana, we did promise you a video of the Moroccans and, of course, some Cameroonians in diaspora. Now, let's see that video.
Freddy, d'abord t'es pas là. Filmez ça. Regardez. Depuis 4 jours, on n'a pas mangé. Depuis 4 jours, on n'a pas mangé. Vous tirez sur notre frère, vous nous laissez. Vous avez tiré nos frères, vous nous laissez. Regardez ce qu'il nous fait. Regardez ce qu'il nous fait. Regardez ce qu'ils ont fait à notre frère. Ils nous tapent. Regardez ce que les Marocains nous font au Maroc. Les frères posent tous les jours, ils nous tapent. Regardez vous-même. Regardez vous-même ce qu'ils nous fait.
All right, so that video and more adds up to the reason why we must draft. Now, talking about draft, let's take a look at Saturday's draft with Momo County, where the draft ended with a huge sum of over 240 US dollars. But as always, we had a remarkable speech from the president just before the drafting commenced. Now, in his usual manner, he first thanked the vice president, Mr. Rikati, and his presidential entourage, Momo County, and the local government area officials, which included Barrister Garner and a list of other amazing people.
Now, after which the president paid homage to the fallen heroes of the county in the person of Major General Commando, General Tiger, Ivo, Bia Bia, etc. He says they were all pioneers of self-defense in this county, in Momo County, and the thousands of civilians who have been victims of the crimes perpetrated by Bia and his genocidal squads in Momo County. The president at this point asked for a moment of silence.
Now, amongst the highlights of a speech, Dr. Sako made it clear that Momo County, even though fought a good fight, bleeding the enemy and chased them out of our territory and made Ambazonia proud, the county still harbored seeds of discord. He christened Thieves United. Proxy forces that are actually in business to sell the struggle, using the struggle for settlement of scores, pitting the fighters against one another, sending contradictory statements to the advantage of our common enemy, La Republic du Cameroon. He says, when we say yes, they say no. When we say left, they say right.
The President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, Dr. Samuel Ikome Sako, used this draft on Saturday to castigate the 77th United Nations General Assembly that held from September 13th that exposed the double standards of the international community for condemning Russia for its invasion of Ukraine and yet remained silent over La Republique du Cameroon's invasion of southern Cameroon. Ambazonia massacring over 50,000 of its denizens since 5 years and counting, assuring that Ambazonia shall not relent but will exploit every diplomatic avenue possible to free homeland. Taking its destiny in its own hands to shame La Republique du Cameroon and the corrupt international community.
All right, Dr. Sako goes on to say that whatever the agenda of the enemy is, Ambazonians, that our warheads are up to date and our ARFs will bleed their enemy. Thou, Dr. Sako assured that. Now, he called on Ambazonians of goodwill, what he terms financial warriors and compatriots, to silence the enemies by drafting more than ever and turn the tables to prove to the world that Ambazonia means business. In this light, Dr. Sako acknowledged that the people of Momo have been everywhere drafting in support of other counties, so today's draft should come to reciprocate that unfailing generosity of the Momoans. Now, let's have the president's speech.
My dear people of the great county of Momo, fellow Ambazonians, today we are in one of the greatest counties in Ambazonia, the orbit around which this revolution revolves. We are in the midst of great revolutionary compatriots. The great county of Momo is a prime engine of our liberation struggle, both intellectually and financially. My dear people of Menemo, Mogamo, Ngi, Njikwa, Widikom, you are the thought leaders of our revolution, the engine room of ideas and ideologies in our revolution. You have shown utmost resilience in the face of barbarism. Your fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, sons, and daughters have been slaughtered in front of your eyes because you dared to challenge the barbarism of the annexationists and their genocide army. My great debt to the Ambazonian people as guide of our liberation quest is to decide correctly, boldly, and timely on all matters pertaining to our quest. My dear comrades, never forget September 22, 2017. We commemorate to celebrate our resolve, to share our determination, and count our sacrifices. September 22, 2017 is a very significant day in our revolutionary history, next only to the 1st of October. It is a day all of us expressed our collective will to free our homeland, and we expressed it in the most African and Ambazonian way. The annexation army rained down bullets from the sky on our unsuspecting protesters and proceeded on a door-to-door find and delete mission to eliminate our innocent people. from the home front or the diaspora, we are all warriors now. They have rejected the wise counsel of our international stakeholders. Bad idea. The great county of Momo embodies the spirit of warriors, a daring people who will stop at nothing until their goal is achieved. That is the spirit I want us all Ambazonians to emulate today as we commune with our brothers and sisters in Momo County. Let us send a message here today to the 77th United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York that has been in session daily since the 13th of this month. Let's tell them that Ukraine has exposed their double standards on peace and security. They condemn Russia but protect La Republic. They support Ukraine but indict Ambazonia. They are very loud on Ukraine but strangely silent on Ambazonia. We understand that wars are about interest, not compassion. We will not wait for compassion. We will fight for the interests of our very survival. It will be an honorable thing if the world supports us. If not, we are willing to take our destiny in our hands, and we have. Our diplomatic machine remains robust and versatile, despite the enemy's pullback from the Swiss-led process. We are here to oblige La République to either recognize us with their eyes open or recognize us with their eyes closed. And that means willingly or unwillingly. That is why we are gathered here tonight to upgrade our ARFs in Momo to take the firepower to a whole new level. We are here to reassure our brave warriors of our renewed effort to put this county at the forefront of self-defense in Amazonia again. Dear financial warriors, today we are in Momo County to draft. Let's do it with honor and patriotism. Remember, La République du Cameroon first rejected our independence in 1961 when they voted no against the United Nations Resolution 1608. Yet, we had our independence because 64 other nations voted in favor. Why do some think La République must vote yes today for our restoration before we go free? Let us face them now as if our backs are on the wall. The only option left for us is to fight back with all we have. Let the draft for this great county kick off right now. Viva the great warriors of Momo County. Viva our brave Amazonia Restoration Forces. Viva the Federal Republic of Amazonia. And God bless our beautiful country.
Alright, this is another breaking news. We have this report coming into Undaunted Studios, and we have pictures of destruction on people of a certain village called Njebunjang in Bafut. Now, this happened yesterday, and today also we got a report also that La République du Cameroon terrorist forces were also behind this.
Now, 5 homes so far have been burnt and about 4 people hospitalized from severe torture. And you can see the pictures for yourself. Those are the houses burnt.
All right, these are the pictures of the houses. The total number of houses burnt so far has been numbered to 5, and 4 people hospitalized from severe torture emanating from these particular incidents. We hope that this will be another reason why you should draft. right, up next is sports. All right, and in sports, Nice, Eintracht Frankfurt, and Juventus have all been sanctioned by UEFA over various incidents of violence and racist behavior, including alleged Nazi salutes. Bangladesh club Frankfurt have been charged with acts of damage and racist behavior.
Now, after a 1-0 win at Marseille in the Champions League on September 13th, they put out a statement distancing the club from what appeared to be a fascist salute by one fan that was captured on video before the game at the Stade Velodrome. Well, Gabelassine has more.
Latest world sports. Football. Nice, Juventus, and Eintracht Frankfurt handed fines and stadium closures by UEFA. Nice, Eintracht Frankfurt, and Juventus have all been sanctioned by UEFA over various incidents of violence and racist behavior, including alleged Nazi salutes. Bundesliga club Frankfurt have been charged with acts of damage and racist behavior after a 1-0 win at Marseille in the Champions League on September 13th. They put out a statement distancing the club from what appeared to be a fascist salute by one fan that was captured on video before the game at the Stade Velodrome. But that hasn't stopped them from receiving a €15,000 fine from UEFA, as well as a suspended partial stadium closure and an away ticket ban for one fixture. In addition, Eintracht were fined €30,000 for the lighting of fireworks, throwing of objects, and acts of damage. League One side Nice have been punished following racist behavior, throwing of objects, lighting of fireworks, and crowd disturbances during the Europa Conference League games against Colonna on September 8 and Partizan Belgrade on September 15th. Nice have been ordered to play their next European game against Slovakia on October 6th behind closed doors and must display a UEFA banner that reads "No to Racism." They have also been banned from selling away tickets for the return game against Czech side Slovakia. Juventus have been fined €15,000 and given a suspended partial stadium closure of at least 1,000 seats during the probationary period of 1 year that followed racist behavior at their Champions League game with Paris Saint-Germain. The trouble at the Marseille vs Frankfurt game has also triggered a suspended punishment against the French club that was handed down by UEFA back in June. They must play their next Champions League game against Sporting Lisbon on October 4th behind closed doors. The Village North stand has also been ordered closed for their home fixture against Tottenham on November 1st for lighting of fireworks, throwing of objects, use of laser pointers, crowd disturbances, and blocking of public passageways. American football, NFL, Week 3. Aaron Rodgers beats Tom Brady and Dolphins go 3-0. Another Tom Brady comeback came up just short as his Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost to Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers 14-12. Although two of the NFL's greatest ever quarterbacks were the headline act, the two defenses dominated in what could be the last meeting between Brady and Rodgers. The other big game of the day saw the Miami Dolphins outlast the Buffalo Bills in the heat of Florida to move to 3-0 for the season. In another exciting Sunday of NFL action, the Philadelphia Eagles also moved to 3-0. The Chicago Bears won with the last kick of the game, and the Las Vegas Raiders became the only team to slip to 0-3. Gab Ellison reporting for Undaunted, ABC Amba News.
And with that sports report, we have come to the end of Undaunted tonight. But before we go, here is a recap of our major stories.
We brought you something this weekend, echoes from Amberland, the land of no return for colonial La République du Cameroon's military. analysis of the president's speech from the just concluded Momo County draft, and the summary of the UN General Assembly speeches.
We also took into deep analysis the Mali Prime Minister as he lashes out at France's UN regional bloc. Ambazonians must investigate Bamenda Central Prison is the story we brought to you today. And in sports, we told you that Juventus and Eintracht Frankfurt handed fines and stadium closures by UEFA. And that was it for tonight's Undaunted, bringing to the news on Church Stories. On behalf of my co-anchor Smart and the entire Undaunted crew, we say thank you for tuning in.
We'll leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.